Thank you all for coming this morning. It looks like we could have fit in the fellowship house, but we're just going to do it in here. We're going to record it also so that other people who couldn't come this morning will be able to take the class online at their own pace later. So that means that you have to listen to me talk through the microphone instead of just talking to you in a small class setting, which it's a trade-off. We'll just say that it's okay. And it also means that when we do some participatory stuff, I'm going to ask you to be patient and let me pass the mic around so that the recording will contain what it was like to be in the room. Let us take a moment to arrive, to notice the ground supporting us, to notice the breath moving through us, the light that allows us to see one another, that other kind of light that is one another. We come here together in spiritual practice. You are wanted here. You are welcome here. And you are needed here. May this be a space of clarity, courage, and care. Amen. Before we begin, learning and practice never happen in a vacuum. They happen in rooms that are always and already alive with experience. So I'm going to invite you to turn to someone near you and share briefly what feels most emergent for you right now. What's on your heart or your mind from this morning, from your life before you walked in here? If you're not sure, you might ask yourself the question, is there something that you're carrying that you want to put down so that you can be present for our work today? Or is there something on your heart that you want to carry with you into the work? So we're going to take just a minute to turn to your neighbor and share how you're showing up this morning. Oh. Thank you for sharing. Are we ready to wrap up, or are we still got some stuff coming out? All right. This is session 1 of Cultivating Wisdom. And today we're just going to spend some time with this one question. When change arrives, what is it that's happening within us? Author and scholar Octavia Butler writes, "All that you touch, you change. And all that you change, changes you." Change is not something happening around us. It's something happening between us and within us. And because change is relational, the real question becomes, what happens inside us when we are being changed? When change arrives, we experience it in our bodies. We feel it in our hearts. We make meaning about it with what we think, with the stories we tell. And sometimes we respond. We act outwardly. We make choices. Sometimes we make choices. Sometimes we just react. And those are different things. We'll circle back to that. When does change arrive? Every moment of every day, if we're being honest. Change arrives all the time. It doesn't take a break while we're sleeping. As those of you who have practiced any form of dream work any time in your life know, or woken up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. It doesn't take a break while we're sleeping. It doesn't take a break while we're loving or living or doing the myriad other things that life requires. So if this change, if this flow is always happening, what does it look like when we resist that change? When we resist the force of what is in our lives, what does that look like? One word for that resistance is dogmatism. When we're in a dogmatic place, when we're in a stuck place, we close ourselves off to new experience. We numb or resist having the feelings that are coming up inside us in response to those experiences. We harden the meanings that we hold. We harden them. Nope, this new piece of data does not fit into my worldview, so I have to harden my worldview. I have to convince myself self-righteously that I'm right as a defense against letting what the world is telling me change how I see it. And, importantly, we repeat reactions even when they fail. We might call these bad habits. We might call them, as they do in the psychological literature, reacting to triggers. Oh, my insecurity got triggered, and so now I'm going to pick a fight with my best friend again for the umpteenth time over something that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with me. So what we're going to do now is we are going to have a little bit of time for reflection and writing. Does anybody need a handout? Will you pass one to Bill? Do you need a writing implement, Bill? I'd be happy to, sir. Individual consultations only run $2.50 an hour. So the first prompt I want you to spend a minute with Where in your life do you close yourself off to new experiences? Where does the direct experience of life show up for you in a way that you, in honest reflection, looking at it through memory, recognize that you're doing this? You're saying, no, I don't want that. I'm not accepting that this thing is happening. I am closing myself off to this experience. Where in your life are you closing yourself off to new experiences? And when I say new, I mean that I don't mean novelty. Let me be precise here. I don't mean, oh, I've never tried that before and now I'm not going to try it. I'm talking about your real everyday life knocking on the door because you're having an experience and you're like, I just can't. I'm not going to think about that thing that is happening in my life. I don't want to face it. I don't want to let it in the door. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about whether or not you want to try the new pizza place in town, or whether or not you're going to eat spanakopita, which you have never tried due to your disdain for feta cheese. All right. If you're still writing on that prompt, you can keep going. But we're going to look at the next one. Where in your life do you numb or resist feeling your feelings? Where in your life are you numbing and resisting the feelings that are coming up for you? Just want to give you permission. If I ask a question in a certain way and nothing's coming up for you except a question you want to ask me, you can raise your hand and say, "What do you mean? Tell me more." Our third question for this part: where in your life do you harden the meanings you hold? This is the traditional definition of dogmatism, which usually refers to cognitively held beliefs. So this is the more literal version of it. Where is it that you are convinced you've got everything figured out, and when new information shows up that contradicts that, you don't ask if your model should change. You start trying to invalidate. Your inner lawyer comes out and starts giving all the reasons why that new information, wrong, misguided, not relevant, gathered by idiots, gathered by people you don't respect or agree with. When do you notice that your inner lawyer gets activated to defend your worldview when new information is coming to light in your life? Yeah, for sure. That's great. That's a great point. Yeah. The question was, could it be perceptions that are being hardened? I would say yes, because usually perception is not just I see and hear you, but there's a layer in there of I have a story about who you are. I have a narrative I tell myself about why you are the way you are. Sometimes that narrative might include clinical diagnoses, right? So perception of a person or a situation that once it's gone through the storytelling filter of your own brain, it is absolutely in bounds for this reflection. Last prompt. Where in your life do you repeat the same reactions even when they fail? Where in your life do you repeat the same reactions even when there's a part of you that recognizes that it's not your best you? This might be choosing to react when you shouldn't. This might be standing by and not saying anything. It might be choosing not to react that is a problem pattern in your life. All right. So, we can do one of two things here. Hi, Jess. We can share with our partners in small groups some of the observations that we just made. Or if you'd like, we can raise hands in the larger group. There's not too many of us. And you can share out loud anything that came up for you during this reflection that you felt was useful or valuable. Now let me just say a couple words. Our goal, of course, is to be a safe space, which means safe enough to be brave. It doesn't mean you're not scared. It doesn't mean that your actions can't or won't have emotional consequences for you and other. That's not what we mean by safety. What we mean is that you're in a room of people who care, and we agree to have each other's backs in a loving and caring way so that we can be brave. And we can't be brave when we're not afraid. That's not how bravery works. It's okay. We're good.
Should I take? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling a little unsure about how to answer the questions. I wrote some things down, but
Okay.
to me, it would be more helpful if I could hear what other people are
Yeah,
saying
great.
to help me clarify.
Do you
my
want to? Is there
thoughts.
anything that you wrote down that stands out to you that you want to say?
Well, I just kind of got off on a tangent that has to do with kind of like politics and patriotism and things like that, and I don't know if that's appropriate for this discussion.
It absolutely is. Look, if it's part of your life and it's happening for you, it is relevant in this room.
Okay. Well, the other day, it sounds kind of menial, but I was looking in a catalog at a sweater that I thought was really nice and I'd like to buy, and it had an American flag on it. And I would have bought it in a heartbeat, 15 years ago. But now I feel like that wing of the politics now has sort of kidnapped the symbolism of the flag, and I feel like I might be sending the wrong message somehow. So that's a little example.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do about it. I'm kind of stuck. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Pam. Yeah. Let me turn this music off. It's better for reflections, but not so great for this. Anyone else would like to share? Here you go, Greg.
Yeah, I answered the question, where in your life do you numb or resist what you feel? I think it's communicating with my daughter, who verbally attacked me on Facebook because of my criticism of what Israel was doing in Gaza. And she unfriended me, and she essentially called me anti-Semitic and so on, which I thought was uncalled for, because actually my wife is Jewish, and she's Jewish. And anyway, but fortunately, I think last night I decided to write an email to her after about more than 2 months that she had written an email that I didn't think was appropriate. Anyway, so I finally, tried to explain my situation and see if we could continue. But she's been very negative, because it's complicated. But basically, she's actually married to an Israeli who's a Zionist, and so she has very different views of what's happened in the world. And I have very different views from her. So that's been very troubling for me for a long time now, because I've been following the situation in Gaza pretty closely, and to me it's heartbreaking. So anyway, that's just what I wrote down.
Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
So I'm going to make an observation. So I'm going to try and shift the energy just a little bit. Nothing that you've written is wrong. Nothing that you could write is wrong. Like, your heart, mind, gut, body, spirit have to process wherever you're at in your life and whatever challenges are showing up for you. But I also want you to see that the invitation of the workshop that we're doing today and that we're going to be doing for the next 4 weeks is really an introspective one, where we're asking, where am I stuck? And we live in a universe where other people are stuck in their own ways, and other people are stuck in their own places. And the curiosity that I want to invite in you is the curiosity about, wait, where am I stuck? And how might I get unstuck? So that's just the invitation. Like I said, it doesn't make anybody's reaction to the prompts right, wrong, or otherwise, but I want to make sure that I'm clear with you about where the focus of the invitation is. Anybody else want to share?
I'm going to read directly from my answer. Where in your life do you close yourself off to new experiences? For me, it's financial literacy and investments. I instantly feel severe fear and a looming dread that I'm being asked to relinquish my morals. And I know that finances can be amoral. They can be emotionally, neutral. But that's one area where, like, if I'm asked to engage in capitalism, I just like I get very fearful. My whole body reacts to it. And the resistance means that I don't, succeed or have abundance that I can then share and redistribute and empower that, like movement of, the flow that is money without the emotion attached to it.
Yeah, thank you.
Where in your life do you close yourself off to a new experience? When I'm expected to live by someone else's standards, my feelings are hurt. The trust that I had in that situation is broken.
Say a little more. Are you willing to say a little more? I just want to understand.
Okay.
When you're expected to live by
someone else's standards. And it happens in your life. Your parents set boundaries and standards which are expected, but in an adult life, you have your own standards, and you think that they're good, that they're productive, that they're keep you on the right track. And if someone else disagrees with those standards, and you're expected to live by their standards in order to receive their acceptance, then my feelings are hurt, and I retreat into myself and disappear into a hole.
Can I ask a follow-up? Are you okay with that? Well, what I'm curious about, so there's a couple different ways that dynamic can work. And I'm curious whether this is about how you feel about the prospect of disappointing people you care about, or whether this is people you care about not having good boundaries and not being willing to accept that you might not have the exact same priorities that they do, and that's okay. Do you see the distinction that I'm making? Yeah, it feels external, not internal. Okay.
And it hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why don't they see that I'm a good person?
Yeah, sorry.
That I'm a good person the way I am, and that if I don't live up to their standards, that's life.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Appreciate that.
Well, first, my inner lawyer is also my outer lawyer. I don't have a boundary between them. I think there are levels of change, and not all change is good or worth conforming to. Superficially, if GPS tells me I'm going the wrong direction, I should be willing to change if I want to get to where I'm going. Or if I've been using a utensil wrong and the instructions tell me I should have done something else, that's one level of change. On a more basic level are my values, the things I believe in. So, for example, I believe in civil rights as it was conceived in the 60s and 70s. Right now, the trend is away from that. That's big change all over on that. And I'm not going to accept that change. I'm going to stick with my view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though a lot of powerful forces are against that. And same with other basic values. So I think it depends on what change you're talking about as to whether. Now, in relationships, recognizing that I've been too rigid about some things in interacting with people, and I may need to be more open, or I need to not judge the way I've been judging, but realize that this other person has their own needs and hopes and desires, et cetera, and my simplistic picture of them. That's places where I think it'd be good for me to change. So it depends on the level and on the type of change. I don't feel like I'm being rigid or dogmatic if I say I still have my values about the worth of individual humans, et cetera, that we talk about, and you're not going to make me surrender those, as opposed to, well, maybe there's a better way I could relate to somebody.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
In the question, where in life do you numb or resist what you feel? And right now, other people I'd love to hear from other people, facing that I'm older and how do I cope with that? When I give in, that I know that I need to keep going and live life fully, even though I'm tired. What do I do now?
In answer to the question, where in life do you harden the meanings you hold, I answered this: when a valid point comes from a known conservative or right-wing source.
I'll tell you, a phrase that's been coming up for recently is, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And now, there's a way that you can use that and dismiss someone. There's also a way that you can hold that expression and use it as a way of embracing a deep truth, which is there is the spark of the divine in each and every one of us, and it is trying to get out. And so even people who might spout things that we disagree with that are toxic and hurtful 92% of the time, it doesn't mean they aren't capable of every once in a while being in a place where the voice of the divine speaks through them too. Although I also hate it. Like, I hate it when I'm doing sermon research and I find the perfect quote that I wanted and I look at the name attached to the quote and I'm like, yeah, nope, not giving that person more airtime, not happening, not on my watch. So, thank you all for sharing. We are going to keep rolling. So, if dogmatism is one side, what does it look like when we accept change? What does it look like when we accept change? Now, I want to follow up on Jim's point, because what I am not suggesting, and we're going to get to later in this workshop some ideas about agency, some ideas about how our values can show up more deeply in the choices that we make and how we choose to respond to the world. What I'm talking about right now, though, is fighting what is different than acknowledging what is, so that you can turn unfairness into justice. Okay, I'm not asking you, why don't you respond acceptingly to injustice? That's not the question. I'm asking you, how clear can you become in your perception of the world as it is, with all of its faults and all of the toxicness that some people are spewing and the transmission of intergenerational trauma? Because my hypothesis, and the reason that we're going to spend 4 weeks together trying to get to the nucleus of this thing, is that doing that dogmatic stuff, even in defense of well thought out, healthy-ish positions, if you are in denial about the way things are, your strategy will be misaligned with reality, and it will be less effective or ineffective. Your strategy for creating justice out of unfairness in this world, or by responding to some people's injustice with your own attempts to realign justice, all of that strategizing is deeply dependent on your ability to see the world clearly as it is, including the woundedness of the people perpetrating injustice. If you misperceive them, as banal purveyors of evil. Does anybody remember the beginning of the first Gulf War? Those people are just evil and they hate freedom. If you are actively engaged in dehumanization, you are going to misperceive the person you've identified as your enemy. If you are actively engaged in dehumanization of human beings, you will misperceive the nature of those against whom you are struggling in a way that will make you ineffective as a force for justice in this world. This is the deep layer of reality that we're trying to push into in this work. And I thought, I'm going to have so much time. We're doing, so one word for acceptance is integration. When we are in an integrated, we might think of these not so much as mindsets, but stance. When our stance toward the world is dogmatic, we're closed off, we're hardened off, and we're creating a breeding ground, just like closing a cabinet with wet stuff inside is a breeding ground for mold. Closing yourself off to new experiences, new ideas, to accepting the reality of what is a place where self-righteousness grows. And one of the things I want to convey to you through this work is the idea that self-righteousness is not justice producing. Self-righteousness is ego inflating. It's about how right you are, not about the needs of your fellow beings. So, when we are in an integrated stance, we remain open to new experience. We ask, what is the world trying to teach me through this experience that I just had, whatever that experience is? We allow ourselves to feel our feelings. I've preached on this many times before. If we feel our feelings, we can metabolize them in healthy ways. If we do not feel our feelings and we try and shove them down, they metastasize into other, even less healthy emotional expressions. So, unmetabolized grief and fear and anxiety turn into metastasized rage and impotence and anger. Not that there aren't natural healthy forms of anger. There are. But this metastasized version ain't one of them, any more than cancer is a healthier form of cell growth. No, it's the opposite. It's the unhealthy kind. Is that making sense to everybody? Okay. We allow ourselves to feel, we revise the meanings we hold. We ask if, does the way my increased clarity about what is and showing up to this experience and having my feelings about it, does it mean that I need to make some tweaks and revisions to my own mental model about how the world works? That is what our brain does. Our brain makes a mental model of how the world works. And a lot of us, for reasons that are very understandable, as we age, we get tired of changing the model. We get tired of editing the model, so we decide at some point we're going to leave the model be. And that anything that comes up that contradicts the model, that's probably wrong anyway. I worked on that model for 40 whole years. I'm good now. That's dogmatism. And the healthiest human beings I've met, one of the things that they have in common, they don't stop learning. And they don't stop editing their mental model. They don't stop finding ways to grow and cultivate deeper compassion. So we revise the meanings we hold, and we do less reacting and more choosing. We're going to get to this in a later one, but notice there's a different language here. When we are in a dogmatic space, we are reacting to some trigger usually. And there's not a lot of thought in it. There's not a lot of choice in it. There's that thing just happened and now financial issues have been raised. Clamshell on. I think many of us in here can relate to that. I know I can. So, we're going to spend a little bit less time than we did before doing some writing. But I'm going to give you a chance to jot down some notes. Where in your life are you really open to new experience? Where is it that you show up bravely? Like, I'm okay with being challenged today. I'm going to invite you not to do full writing on this, but just drop a few keywords on the page so that you can go back to this worksheet at some later time, and there's enough words there to remind you of what you were thinking of so that you can really sit down and do the journal style exercise later where you let your brain flow onto the page. Where in your life do you let yourself fully feel what you feel? Interesting side note on this one. If you notice that there are some spaces where that's true for you and some not, you've just answered the question, where are my safe or brave spaces? The safe or brave spaces in your life are the ones where you get to say yes to this question. Where in your life do you revise the meanings that you hold? There are some parts of our mental model that we defend more fiercely than others. There are some parts of our mental model that we're like, oh yeah, I was wrong. I was kind of wrong about that, but now I think about it this way instead, and I'm cool with that. And there are some parts where our identity gets wrapped in with what we think about things, and usually those are the ones where you're ready to like take off your jacket and throw down and be like, nope, to the death. I will defend this worldview to the death. Where in your life do you make new choices, even when they're scary, and especially when they align with your values? Where in your life do you make new choices, even when they're scary, and especially when they align with your values? I know that some of the folks in here made a choice yesterday. Some of the folks in this congregation made a choice yesterday, and our singing resistance group got in a caravan of cars and drove down to Dilley, Texas to sing songs. And that's a different choice about how to spend a Saturday, is a way of responding to the call of justice in this moment. And I would argue in a way of doing it that is clear-eyed about the realities that are happening. So I thought it would be helpful to put these up on the screen at the same time so that you can see them comparatively. This idea of openness versus closedness is the big idea. And some of you might be wondering, that's great, Eric, but how does this relate to wisdom? I don't understand. And that's okay too, because this is just the first session. We're going to get there. Here's what I want you to contemplate before we meet again. When you're under pressure, when you're triggered, when they just started a new war in Iran, when you bounce a check, when life happens in a hard way. We all know what that moment's like. When life happens in a hard way, we do not rise to the level of our professed values. We tend to sink to the level of our integration. We have a hard time being supple while we're being rigid. So when life gets hard, my proposal to you is that our ability to react wisely in that moment of hardness is generally determined by how we've been able to practice openness in our lives leading up to that crisis moment. If we've been in a place where we stay in our routine so that we don't get disturbed and we are maybe using some 2 glasses of wine every night just to keep the feelings in check so they don't get too out of whack, and every time we see something on the news, we just use it as another way to convince ourselves about how right we are in our opinions about things. And yet we still find ourselves making some of the same bad habitual decisions over and over again, maybe including the 2 glasses of wine last night. If that's how we're living, we're not going to be very flexible when crisis shows up. Lest you think that I am somehow above this, things have been a little stressful for me lately. And yesterday, despite having run this experiment many, many times, I decided at my friend's birthday party that I should drink enough that I would stop worrying about some things that had been bothering me. And I did. Stop worrying about those things. Here's the negative unintended consequence of that strategic choice. I spent the latter half of the day after the party feeling disconnected from my family, feeling disoriented, and feeling embarrassed because I couldn't undo it. I couldn't undo it and go back to being in my normal, alive, awake, and engaged state. I'd already made the choice. Now, I've run that experiment enough times that if I had been thinking clearly before I started the experiment, I would not have repeated the flawed experiment again. But that's what we do, isn't it? Sometimes we run the same damn experiment even when we know what the outcome's going to be. Sometimes it might involve some substance that we're putting in our bodies. Sometimes it might involve an angry text, email, or voice message that we leave for someone we care about who has crossed some boundary with us. Sometimes it might be about the stories we tell ourselves, about how we treat ourselves. I want to open it up now. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I just want to provide some space for people to either share something that you're thinking or feeling in this moment as we wrap up our first session, ask a question, whatever's on your heart or mind.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think something that I've been realizing in attending seminary and it being more of a community-based seminary and not an online or a just a different style seminary is that human interaction is always going to be difficult, no matter what the desired goal is, which is fun to think about. You're like, oh, the irony of attending seminary and seeing all of these interpersonal issues happen between people. And the conversation about agency and all of that kind of reminded me of just certain situations where there's a very fine line between your agency and your beliefs and the grace that you give people, especially being Unitarian Universalist at a Christian seminary, which historically we are very Christian, but there's that fine line of where, for instance, maybe you learn one of your classmates is not so subtly a racist. How much grace can you comfortably extend to that person while maintaining your own personal boundaries and morals, where you want to extend the love and care that you extend to everybody, because everyone, even a racist, has inherent worth and dignity. Where's the line drawn? That's the difficult decisions that we have to make every day.
Yeah, thank you. Will you pass that to Molly right behind you? Thank you.
it makes me think that that I think sometimes I believe that if we are living a life of wisdom or maturity or however you want to describe it, it will be free of conflict or of difficulty, and that's not the consequence. So when that comes, you have to make sure I'm not doing something wrong. There's just a conflict here, and it doesn't feel comfortable. And how much attention can I give to it without just escaping or running away? And practicing that, being able to practice staying in that place of feeling so much discomfort, so you get better at it because it's not going away.
Yeah, thank you all. Yes, those are. So I think, Andrea, you hit on something really important, which is this idea about accountability. I would argue that accountability is a wisdom practice that is underdeveloped in our culture. Like, we don't have good practices for holding one another accountable, but accountability is how we do that, right? Accountability is, I'm not going to dehumanize you, nor am I going to give you a free pass to just spout racist nonsense in my presence, right? So healthy boundaries, we hear it talked a lot about in therapeutic cycles, but I think we talk about it more than we practice it, folks. We talk about having healthy boundaries a lot. Demonstrable practices of setting boundaries, the skills and perspectives required to do healthy boundary setting, we talk about less. And Molly, I couldn't agree more. Like, I sometimes think that it's our over-prioritization of comfort that keeps us from wisdom. We think it's we have this false idea that if I'm acting wisely, everything's going to be smooth and cool, man. And in some ways it is, but in many ways it is not. Like, you are going to have accountability conversations that you could safely avoid if you're like doing the no, I'm good, man. I got my fingers in my ears, I got my hands over my eyes, no, we're cool, whatever. Right? Like, if you're walking in open to experience, as I'm suggesting, and your classmate says something blatantly harmful, hurtful, and racist, only a closed-off person can let that pass. A deeply open person can't just be like, oh, I guess that's okay, I'm going to let that go. Now, that's counterintuitive, is it? I see Judy looking at me like, wait, what? You have to be closed off to not feel the pain of that. If you are emotionally closed off, that person can say that and you can write it off. I guess they're just a racist. If you're really heart open in that moment, your heart breaks when you hear that. Your heart breaks when you hear that expression of dehumanization coming out of a sibling, because you see immediately and at once two things. One, they're harming other people, and two, they're acting out their own harm and trauma and brokenness. And so the compassion goes both ways. I can see how deeply you must have been harmed in your life for those words to come out of your mouth and for you to mean them. And they're still hurting other people, and that transmission of harm is not okay. This is what I mean when I'm talking about openness. I'm not saying that I'm open to the fact that the world is becoming more racist. So I appreciate Jim pointing out that, like, there's a gradient here that we're operating in, the same gradient along which one starts to question whether or not or how often it's okay to display the American flag and whether it means something different than it used to. Right? If you think that there's anything in this world that's apolitical, all it shows is that you fail to understand the meaning of the word political. It's like saying, oh, there are certain things that are just not part of ecology. I think that's just that you don't understand what the word ecology means, since ecology is about the deep interconnected and interrelatedness of all things and the unfolding of the world and universe. So, we're at time today. Thank you so much for being here. We will do this again. Keith and Frank, is 9:10 to 10:10 okay? Is that going to be enough time for you guys to transition? We're good? Okay. Thank you all for coming. You've got 20 minutes before church starts. If you have thoughts, questions, curiosities, or things that you'd like me to take into account before we meet again, please feel free to send me an email or a text, okay? If you end up writing something on your paper that you want to share with me, you can email it to me. I don't know how fast I'll give you feedback, but I will give you feedback eventually. Like I said, thank you for making the time to come this morning. I look forward to doing this sequence with y'all. I hope you found it worthwhile this morning.